Yeah, so in this video, I wanted to talk about some of the logic that might underpin Christianity's emphasis on heart over deeds. Sometimes I like to think about the purposive utilitarian explanations for certain schools of ethics and why we have certain values and make certain ethical distinctions and not others. And since ethics is an area of huge philosophical ambiguity and very interesting intrigue, um, I guess what I'm thinking about is, according to Christianity, Christian ethics, a large part of it is redemption from original sin. I don't believe that there is such a thing as original sin. Or anything like that, but that's a part of the Christian narrative, of ethical narrative or moral narrative of what humans are and how we should act and who becomes a good person. And, these kinds of questions are impossible to answer. It ends up being subjective and very much dependent upon what ethical school you're looking at. It's almost a meaningless question. But one of the things that religion tries to do, or part of Christianity anyway, is this idea of redemption from sin, right? Uh, Necessary because of original sin and because humans are ethically fallible, morally fallible, or whatever. And I guess I just want to try to explain some of the logic behind Christianity's emphasis on heart over deeds and why that distinction needs to be made and how that makes sense and within the context of the religion. And it's a very interesting philosophical question. In any case, so I've tried to break down, right? Break this down logically. Okay, so the question is, why does Christianity, what is the logic behind the implicit rejection of a deeds-based form of salvation or redemption? Right? What is the logic behind rejecting deeds and looking at something deeper than deeds to determine if a person is redeemed in the Christian sense? Not to say that now I'm only trying to get at the logic behind why Christianity has certain positions and not others. I'm not a Christian. For the most part, I think Christianity, just like any other common, everyday, popular religion, is extremely flawed and unnecessary and problematic and more evil than it is good, if we can even use such labels. But in any case, I still think it's very interesting to think about some of how we might think about the utility of certain ethical values and why Christianity would value a deeper examination of a person to determine who becomes a good person or a bad person within the contained ethical logic of that system. It's just an interesting area of, it's an interesting area of philosophy. Ethics is an interesting branch of philosophy. So in any case, what would be the problem with determining whether someone is a good person based on their deeds? Why not just why not weigh deeds and use deeds to determine if someone is a good person? Looking at it's the idea of God being an accountant, right? Of simply taking note of the good and the bad actions and then judging whether a person is morally good because they did a lot of good stuff. What would be the problem with that, right? It's a very TE objective, and it's like a moral accounting system, and it's seemingly compelling, but there is one problem with that system. I think TE and SI would better, as this links back to MBTI, would be more comfortable with that kind of an ethical accounting system. And a person is good because accounting demonstrates that their deeds are good. So it's that simple, right? Seems logical. Now, why would that be problematic? So the reason that that would be problematic, the reason that Christianity does not have a model of deeds-based redemption, or distinguishes between good and bad people not based on deeds, is because if we rely on an accounting of deeds to determine if someone is a good or a bad person, then it would enable bad people to do good things, still be bad people, and then be considered good, even if they're bad, because they've done good things. So that's the logic behind rejecting a deeds-based form of salvation or redemption under the ethical logic of Christianity, because a deeds-based system, right, an ethical accounting system by which, oh, just count up all of your, the ethical arithmetic of, oh, we'll count up all of your good actions and then you're good if, you've reached a certain threshold, ultimately enables really bad, truly bad people, if there's a distinction between how we act and who we are, to do good things and then appear good, but really just be bad. So that's why Christianity rejects that. That's the ethical logic used there. Yeah. So breaking it down, a bad person doing bad things is deemed bad. Okay, fair. What about a bad person that does good things? So Christianity would still consider them bad, right? It would have a deeper examination. A good person that does good things is good. What about a good person that does bad things, though? This is the interesting possibility we have to consider as this links back to MBTI and after all, this is the INTP live stream. What about, the interesting possibility, what about a good person who does bad things under Christianity, right? So they're a good person, but and then it all comes down to how we define the terms good and bad, right? And what is a good thing and what is a good person and what makes it. Of course, these kinds of questions ultimately end up being very useless once we're talking about, but I'm just talking about the ethical logic of Christianity as a religion, which is, in large part to be rejected, but it has its own purposive logic to it that's interesting to go into the mechanics of. So, bad person, bad things, bad. Bad person, good things, bad. Good person, good things, good. What about a good person who does bad things, though? I mean, that's the interesting possibility there, right? Breaking this up going into the mechanics of all the possibilities here. That's a very interesting possibility there. Good person, bad things. Are they still good if they do bad things? Well, it comes down to the question of, is a person defined by their actions or by something else? By their motives or by their heart, right, as Christianity would, or by their soul or something deeper than action, which is to say that a person is not just their exterior behavior, they're also, which also links back to MBTI, they're also an internal process. So what about a good person who does bad things? Are they still good under the Christian ethical logic of Christianity? I mean, I think that's a very interesting question to go through each one of these possibilities. Clearly, a bad person that does good things, the reason we don't rely on deeds to determine whether someone is good or bad is because, that a bad person can do good things and still truly bad on the inside. So, but what about a good person who does bad things? And then we get into the deeper questions, right? How can we say if a person is good? Right? So, thought and action. A person is their thought and their action, and their emotion, if you want to make the distinction between thought and emotion. So, what is it? Is a question I would pose. And is this not a wrench we could throw into the Christian system of ethics? Good person, bad things, right? So we can very easily say that under the logic of the implicit rejection of deeds, ethical accounting is a way of counting up the arithmetic of adding together all your deeds and then determining who you are based on that. A bad person who does bad things, Christianity would still say, well, obviously that's bad, right? Bad person who does good things, still a bad person. I just said it's a bad person, therefore. Good person who does good things, well, we just said they're a good person. If we're trying to determine if they're a good or bad person, then they're a good person. But a good person who does bad things, are they then a good person? Do bad things? And then raises the question of, is a person their action, exterior behavior, or is a person their thoughts, emotions, and all of the internal processes behind it? Can we use action to determine who a person is in both an ethical and psychological sense? Can you be good? Can you be good? Can you genuinely be a good person that just does bad things all the time? So I mean that to me is the wrench here that could very easily be thrown into the this ethical ethical system of Christianity. Right? Seems perfectly plausible that we could just implicitly reject a deeds-based form of redemption and say, well, yeah, okay, bad person. If we do that, then bad people can just do good things and maintain a good record, but outside that record, they can truly be just bad people. But again, the same problem so breaking up the mechanics of all the possibilities, the same problem that exists with a good person that does bad things exists with a bad person that does good things. If they just do a bunch of good things all the time, but clearly we would say, right? So we'd say, yeah, they can be a bad person. I think we could all agree. Yeah, they can be a bad person and do and do good things, and they mostly do good things, but they can still be a bad person, right? They can literally always, all the time, absolutely, 100% of the time, unconditionally, do good things all the time and still be a bad person. Yeah, in the same way, a good person can do bad things and still be a good person. So, I don't know. These are just some of the mechanics of how the ethics of the logic of how both of how Christian ethics is constructed, and why we use certain heuristics, and why we don't use deeds as a heuristic to determine moral goodness. And it's very interesting to think about. It's a very, very interesting philosophical question. Getting into the school of ethics, a person does good things always. They always do a good thing, right? Assuming that we can define what is good and bad. They always do a good thing. Can they still be a bad person? Yes, because there's the exterior behavior, then there's the internal self and the internal process. In the same way, bad behaviors on the outside don't necessarily indicate a bad person on the inside. So I think that that's an important piece of ethical logic to accept. So in this sense, Christianity is maybe closer to being a valid. We could at least take this from, like, I like to think about secularizing ethics and then building my own, or my own, but a secular ethical system. And we in a sense, these religions are lies that contain truths, and generally invalid systems that don't really serve a good purpose, but contain good things within them. They're generally bad, but contain good things. This may be one of them. This distinction between the exterior behavior of a person and their internal self, and the rejection of a deeds-based ethical, accounting system by which a person gets into heaven because they did good deeds. Of course, I've said I'm an atheist, and I don't believe in heaven or any of this, and I don't accept the validity of religion in general, even from a utilitarian standpoint. And there are many principles inherent in these systems that are very disturbing and very dangerous and very upsetting, and how just erroneous they are. But regardless, we can take at least this distinction between the exterior self and the internal process and the internal behavior. The very good, I think, the better judgment that, yes, it's certainly possible to reject an estimation of a person's moral worth based on their deeds, because they could still be a bad person on the inside. On the other hand, This is a more sophisticated way of looking at whether a person is ethical in a philosophical sense, to the extent that matters. It isn't really so useful for me to use these systems to judge, oh, is this person good or is this person bad? I really don't care about that per se, unless it's pertaining to my personal life. But it's an important distinction to make, that we have to reject a deeds-based system by which we distinguish between a good or a bad person, because that accepting that system would allow bad people to do good things and then be considered good even though they're bad. On the other hand, we don't want to too quickly judge people that are bad on the outside because there may be a good person on the inside. So, in any case, that's the only point that I wanted to make. Yeah. So as this links back to MBTI, I mean, this is I've called it the INTP live stream. I feel, deeds-based ethical systems are deeds-based ways of going about determining whether a person is good or bad. Which, whether or not that matters in a purely logical sense, it's not really a question that I'm particularly interested in. I don't really like applying this kind of stuff to particular people and then particular things. But speaking in terms of the general logic of why Christianity has valued certain things and not others is definitely an interesting philosophical aspect to the whole question. So, to the whole issue. So, anyway, that's all that I really wanted to talk about in this one. There are any I see we have one viewer. Are there any clarifying questions or related questions? If not, then I'll end the stream pretty soon. Okay, let's see. And then in the oh yeah, and then the next video, maybe a topic that I would want to discuss. Let's see. Might be talking more about religion than from a utilitarian perspective. Yeah. Okay, guys. Thank you.